My dad loved us the best he could, but the drugs and the alcohol controlled everything that he did. My dad's habits caused him to be violent and very loud, and he'd hurt my mom. And I thought, if I could just do this, or I could just be this way, I could make it better. And that became a very bad habit, because I'm not God. I can't fix things. I can't make them right. He had been dealing drugs out of our home and at work, and he was sentenced to prison this time. And it broke my heart, and I just prayed. I didn't know what to do. I knew he didn't know the Lord, but I didn't know how to say things any different or do things any different to make him come to Christ. And I was in that bad habit again of fixing things. I have an immune deficiency disease called Wilkinson's disease, but it manifests itself mostly in my skin, and I break out with blisters. I was approaching 30 and not having a baby. And so we began seeing another doctor, a reproductive endocrinologist, to see what could be done. And they said there was another medication I could try to even out my blood sugars and become pregnant. After a few days of taking it, I noticed I had a hard time talking. And so they began treating, because by that time I was head to toe blisters. It was on the epidermis of my skin. It was down into the dermis of my skin. I would take the radiation treatments in the morning and try to teach in the afternoon. And I thought, I just need to keep going because I can't stop. It'll hurt too much. Why was this happening? Didn't he love us? What was I doing wrong? Why was he punishing me? They're very simple questions, but at the core, that's where I was. So after we had Jocelyn, Matthew came along. Then we came to the point where it was 3.5 months before my delivery, and I started having problems. So Matt just scooped up the kids, and we all went to the hospital thinking, we'll be there for a few hours, they'll help us, we'll go home. It didn't happen that way because I had an abruption. And that night they took Lucas, after we saw him for a few minutes, they took him to St. Vincent's Women's Hospital, and he stayed there for 3 months. I called a friend and said to her on the phone, I said, Mandy, what if God says no? I think it was one of the most honest points I'd ever had. I wasn't trying to be anything. I was just being a mom. And I realized that I really did not trust God. I searched and I prayed. Lord, I need comfort right now. Lord, I need guidance right now. Through Job, I read him, and I found out those trials were not even about me. They were about him. And I found out those trials were times when people were paying attention to what was happening in my life, when they weren't paying attention at other times. And I found God to be just as faithful in those times, because I was paying attention to what he was doing then, as he had been in the good times. And I found him to be everything I needed. When I was at Bible college, I began praying for my dad and for his salvation. I began sending him letters. I didn't want him to think I was judging him. I wanted him to see it in love. And I thought maybe if I wrote a letter to him, he would read it again and think about what I was saying. I found those letters after he died. My dad had come to the Lord a few years before he died. I love you, O Lord, my strength. The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer. My God, my rock in whom I take refuge. My shield and the horn of my salvation. My stronghold. I call upon the Lord who is worthy to be praised. In my distress I called upon the Lord. To my God I cried for help. From his temple he heard my voice, and my cry to him reached his ears. My name is Jen Vowles, and Jesus is my Lord.